How's it going? Have you ever seen a tornado in person? So at the time I didn't know what it was, but when I was 5 years old, I was riding in a truck driven by Lamar Gaddis. He was an English guy that used to drive my parents around and my grandmother. And my grandmother had went to town, and then she had stopped by our house to pick up me and my younger sister. And she was going to keep us overnight, and the next morning my family was going to come to her house. So they didn't have to take all of us in the buggy, and we wanted to spend the night with her. Well, we get in the truck and we're driving, and most of the Amish, at least back then, did not have car seats, for their kids when they rode in vehicles. We were just sitting in the front seat with my grandma, and I see this smoke cloud in the distance. It looked like a funnel of smoke. It was about the only thing I could relate it to at the time. At that age, it was the only thing I had seen is like a brush fire with with smoke coming out of it and embers or something. And I could see the embers, swirling around in it. And I was, and then it got closer and closer. And my grandmother started screaming at Lamar Gaddis and telling him to turn around. And he just laughed. He was, I don't know, in his 60s probably. And he always wore coveralls. And he always had candy in his pockets. He'd put his hand in his pockets and jingle all his change around, and then he'd come out with some candy for us kids every time. He was a nice old man. I remember being very sad when he passed away. But anyway, he just chuckles and keeps driving, and I see this ember, and it's coming closer and closer, and it bounces off the hood of his old truck and rolls up over the windshield. And I realized it was a piece of firewood. And, as it got closer, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. And I remember when we got to my grandmother's house, it was a few miles down the road. And we pulled in, and it was pouring down rain. And he parked, it wasn't too far to the door. But I remember rushing in, my grandmother rushing us in the rain. And we were so glad to be, home safe. But then we were worried about our house, the house that I lived in, because a tornado had already taken the roof off the house once, so we were kind of worried about that. I couldn't wait to get home the next day and make sure that everything was okay back home, because I didn't realize what it was until my grandmother told me that it was, in fact, a tornado, and I had heard about the tornado that took my parents' roof off, so seeing one up that close, it scared me much more after the fact, knowing what it was, than it did during the moment when I didn't know what it was. How's it going? So before I was born, a tornado took the roof off my parents' Amish house. Now they didn't have any TV or radio to hear the tornado warnings. They were too far from town to hear a whistle. It was in the middle of the night. It was dark. They had no idea what was coming for them. And once they heard, the wind really started to blow, my dad went out to look out the window, see what he could see. And he said, run for the basement. My mom grabbed the 3 children that they had at that time. And my dad went and opened up the basement door, and he was standing there, and then the windows broke out of the house. And the vacuum pushed the basement door shut and pushed my dad into the basement, like onto the stairs. And my mom was on the other side with the 3 kids. And my dad was trying to open the door. He couldn't open the door. And my mom just, hovered over all 3 kids and prayed. And then she said just this terrible screeching noise as the nails all ripped out, and the whole roof and the ceiling and everything went. And it was a 1-story house at that time. And I still remember, growing up, the parts of this roof were still laying back in the field, all intact. And we used to walk up on the shingles, But just the sheer power that tornado had to just take the roof off the house and leave the first story, it had a full walkout basement, but also first story. It didn't take any of the walls. If it had, I wouldn't be here. My mom wouldn't be here. My dad, all of my family would have been probably wiped out in that moment. Then it was raining on them, but at least they were safe. And when they were rebuilding the house and they had a frolic to put the roof on, is when my mom went into labor and I was born. But I still remember as a small child, even growing up, whenever there was a severe thunderstorm, we would go to the basement. In the middle of the night, my parents would wake up. They'd wake up all us kids, yell up the stairs and tell us to come downstairs. And we'd all go to the basement and wait it out. And if it was the middle of the day, we'd do the same thing if it was a severe thunderstorm and, a chance of a tornado. So that's the story of how I almost was even never here. So God bless you all. Stay safe out there.